what we do
Oh,
and why we have to do it
yeah.
goes back to the Lakeview versus the state of Arkansas, in which the school system was considered unconstitutional. Lakeview decision was November 11th of 2002, and the Supreme Court affirmed two things about educational facilities: that they were inadequate and unequal, and they were in violation of the state constitution, that every child, regardless of their geographic or economic status, were entitled to an adequate and efficient school public education. So a couple of things had to be done. You know, they set these mandates out, and so we had to determine what is equitability, what is adequacy. We had to raise the standard of education. We had to determine what are the standards for new facilities. We had to look at the facility condition index. We had to look at programs and services. And then again, suitability need. So equitability, ensuring that every student in the state of Arkansas is afforded the same opportunities. So equitable means that students in Mountain Home can take Latin, and students in Camden, Arkansas can take Latin. Or students in Mountain Home can take biology in a biology lab, and students in Camden, Arkansas can take biology in a biology lab. That's equitable. Suitability, how big of a school should you have according to your highest projected growth enrollment, okay? So then it's the number of students times the square foot per child gives you the overall building gross square footage. Adequacy means, are the spaces in the building the right size? So science labs today are 1,400 square feet. A lot of its classrooms are much less than that if they were built before 2005. So that's adequacy, making sure that you have the right spaces and the right size of spaces. So when the Supreme Court said that they wanted a snapshot in time, at that point we did hire, I think it was like 35 or 40 architectural engineering firms, and there were program managers. I was a program manager under the legislative task force. And we had to go out and do an assessment of every building, not every campus, but every building. And at that time, there were 308 school districts, there were 5,700 buildings, and there was 80 million square feet of floor space. Everything has doubled and tripled except for the districts. I think we're down to 250, I believe, now. The collection of the data, it was 100 pages per building. So it didn't matter if it was a 100,000 square foot building or a 10,000 square foot building. There was 100 pages of assessment, and these dealt with everything down to, so as a program manager, I went in on the front end before the architects and the engineers, and I got baseline data. I went around and counted how many electrical outlets were in the classrooms. You know, how many classrooms were they? What were the classrooms? So that was for every building. Now, while all of this is going on, there's a group of architects, engineers, teachers, principals, and superintendents who are developing the standards for construction. Prior to this, there was a one-page document for construction. And other than that, all they had to follow was the Arkansas Building Code or the State Fire Code. Now, there's a 300-page construction manual that's in place. So we were getting all this data, and we used that, so it was kind of like, what is the ideal school? What would the ideal elementary school have? What would the ideal high school have? How many data ports should you have in the classroom? How many electrical outlets? So all of that's being worked in the background while we're out doing the assessment. These are some of the schools that we looked at. Many of the schools in Arkansas, even still today, suffer from maintenance, neglect, and lack of funding. Sadly, one of the first areas that gets budgetary cuts is maintenance. For the most part, not many districts in the state have the recommended number of maintenance people or custodians. The standard, I shouldn't say the standard, the recommended number is for every 18 to 20,000 square feet you have a custodian. For every 80 to 90,000 square feet you have a maintenance person. So most of the districts I work with are grossly under. I have one district, of course it's not the size of Mount Home, it's Charleston, I'm sure everybody's heard of Charleston. They have one maintenance person for the entire district. They have 3 custodians for the entire district. I mean, it takes me all weekend to clean just my house, so you can imagine it doesn't always get done to the highest level just because of the man hours and the manpower. These are some other buildings that were in use as academic classrooms. Funny story about that building up on the left corner. When we did our assessment, we picked out several districts as a pilot district so that the engineers and the architects could get familiar with the assessment tools, the paperwork, and the buildings. So they picked metropolis schools, rural schools, and then super isolated. There's only a handful of super isolated. This is OARC school. OARC is north of Johnson County. At the time, OARC was its own independent school district. It has now been consolidated in '05 to go into Jasper School District. This was their high school. That's what I thought. And they actually had wood-burning stoves in the basement, and they nailed all the windows shut.
No carbon
So-
monoxide.
Just a little bit of carbon monoxide.
Little bit.
I said, those kids were probably dumb as a poot and how. So that building was closed, as you can imagine.
Why?
And students are no longer allowed in there.
It's a storage building now.
Winslow School is no more. So this is the age of the buildings, and so again, it goes to the early 1900s up to 2004 when we did the assessment. You can see there was a huge spike in construction in about a 25-year period between the 60s and then another big surge in the 90s. The funny thing is most buildings built in the 60s and the 70s are all flat roofs. And don't know why anybody in Arkansas would put a flat roof on a building in Arkansas. These are things that we see even yet today. Chains on the inside of a gym door.
No fire hazard there.
So adequacy, again, how much space and suitability and adequacy of the programs. Your enrollment growth, the district-wide projected enrollment. The enrollment projections are based on what they call a cohort survival, which looks at a group of kids in kindergarten and follows them through a 12-year period, and it also factors in live birth data from the community. That's why it's really important in my narrative that I look at the community demographics, because they don't look at if there's new industry, if there's housing developments, and those will eventually all kind of trickle in and factor in. So then, like I was talking, they did not have any kind of construction. Now we have an Arkansas Academic Facility Manual. All architects have to follow this rule. The rule of thumb is if the standard, which is the facility manual, is higher than the code, they must abide by the standard, okay? So a good example, we had a couple of contractors last year that were doing conduit for electrical. And the code is 3/4 inch, okay? The standard is 1.5 inches. So they had to go in and the contractor had to pull all the 3/4 and replace it with 1.5 inches because the standard is higher than the code. Please feel any time to ask a question or. They looked at how do you kind of propose to look at elementary school sizes. You know, an elementary school would be 200 to 700 students. Anything bigger than that, you would need a secondary elementary, same with high school. And then our class sizes. I think this has actually changed a little bit. This is where you get into trouble. I get a lot of districts that will tell me, I need to apply for partnership, I just don't have any room. Just don't have any room. And I go down and I run a POR, program of requirements, that looks at all of their existing space. And I go, well, you've actually got too much space. And I ask them, how are you running your class sizes? Well, we're running 15 kids in a class. Therein lies the problem. It's great, and a lot of districts prefer to do small classes, but it will hurt the district in the end.
It will hurt the application for the partnership funding,
Not academic.
not academically.
Right, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I probably said that wrong.
Yeah.
I say
Yeah,
academically.
it'll
it
hurt
helps.
the partnership.
It'll
application.
hurt the 44 cents on the dollar, not the outcome
the
of the student's
academic, right.
achievement. Okay.
Because, you know, they enjoy having the smaller class sizes, they have more intimate relationship with the students. But when they want to try to get more classrooms, they're gonna be shocked because they've got too much square footage.
So we're actually penalized for having our own set of higher standards.
The partnership funding is for the minimum amount of space needed for the number of students, right? So if we say we want to do something above the minimum, they don't cover that extra.
Right.
It's,
That's
they
right,
cover,
so that
they cover the
POR,
minimum.
and we'll look at one, the POR is a minimum build, maximum fund.
And that's why on that application process, like the square footage, that was recommended was smaller, but we were trying, you know, we already are utilizing a second gymnasium, but those spaces aren't included in that, is that?
Well, you have, because Dunbar, you have the fine arts, you know, you have the library, you have the other wing of classroom buildings, and so it looks at
Like
the
Owens.
overall square footage of the campus, and then it says, okay, and I'll show you what our actual POR looked like. It says, okay, for this many kids, you should have 180,000 square foot high school. You have existing 80,000 square feet, therefore we're only gonna approve 100, right? So that's what happened with that one, and that's why when they came back and said, we're gonna give you that allowance for that cafeteria and kitchen, because we recognize that if you do take it down, it will be destroyed, it won't stand. But otherwise, they're like, no, it doesn't need to come down, but all of that space, it's called excess space, and it counts against us.
Do the gyms count?
Yes, if it was built after 2008.
No,
Okay.
our gyms don't count. They're old.
Yeah, ours don't count.
I'll show you.
That's a good thing.
So these are
Pre-2008.
space plates. Space plates are what the architects use, and the mechanical and electrical people use when they're actually get into kind of the
Look at that classroom.
nitty-gritty of the design development of a room, so they know exactly where things need to go.
What's Mina?
I think we've kind of covered that. So this is about a year old, but you can see, so the preliminary master plan, which is the odd year, is due February 1st of the odd year. We have a consultations with the division in the summer of the odd year. Districts get a notice that their master plan has been approved in the fall of the odd year. and then starts over. Submission in the February 1st of the even year, partnership applications March 1st of the even year, master plan approvals September of the even year, notification of partnership approval and funding May 1st of the odd year. So you apply for money in the even year that's available in the odd year. You always are kind of
Pushing it in.
thinking forward at least a year and a half out. We've seen that, we've seen that. Let's change. That's changed.
Sure, that's
So let's
really
look at
good
what's
for us.
important to us.
This is very healthy.
They having a party out there?
Yeah. Put that on there.
We invited them to our party, why can't we go to theirs?
So when we looked at originally applying for the high school project, this is the architectural schematic that you have to have. It has to show interior spaces, outside dimensions, gross square footage. It does not have to represent the way the building is laid out, but it has to represent the spaces in the rooms. The other thing that was loaded was the structural observation report, the code analysis, the school board resolution, and then these are the FCI reports that the state came up and performed. So we'll take a look. So this is the one that's done over the admin classroom area. I believe that's 1986. And this is, so this is everything. These are all the systems and subsystems that they go through and look at, and they tell you if it's, you know, reasonable to replace or no. At the very bottom, the total FCI of that building, facility condition index, is 42.3. So it's gonna cost 42% as much to renovate as it would to replace. So they suggested, based off of not only the age and the FCI, but also the fact that it was located under the PMB, that that section be replaced. This is one, this is the cafeteria and commons, okay? Again, this is a 1990s, 96, I believe. And you can see there's a lot of no's on it. It's 37.4%. They did not agree with replacing this building. But then they came back and they went, yeah, I guess we should, because of the structural component of it.
Because you can't take down the big top without destroying the cafeteria because they're so.
This is the main component of the senior high school. I think it's 75,000 square feet roughly. This is 1966. It shows the subsystem percent of cost, the system replacement of cost, the FCI on that building is 67.8%. And they added the total function, which is looking at the safety component, green space and playground, the rooms. They bumped it up to 73.7%. And by rooms, they looked at, are the rooms adequate? Are they the right size for the program areas that they are? And about 85% of the rooms in the high school are undersized for what they should be. And then what I have to send in, this is where you start looking at that excess square footage we were talking about. So now again, this was February, okay? We had an enrollment change, so 23-24, which is where we're at, right? Yeah. We were projected to have 952 students in 10 through 12, and I think we're a little bit over 900, okay? In the event that a district, for instance, again, I'm going to put a big if out there, if we have to replace the building and we have a declining enrollment, instead of looking at the 5-year highest projected, they only make us look 2 years ahead, okay? Because they figure if you're declining by 5, you're gonna be lower than you are by 2, right? So they only make us look 2 years ahead. This is where we start looking at the square footage. So this is all of the high school buildings, with the exception of the ones that we had originally said we were gonna demolish, which would be the library, the fine arts, and the high school. So you can see this is, you have 139,000 square feet of academic space, okay? And you have 36,000 square feet of non-academic. And you look at your suitability. There's some areas that you're able to pull out. So we have 41,000 square feet of just gym. We have 22,000 square feet of an auditorium. And then I tell the division what my building values are. Again, it's looking at the age of the building only. So this is how a POR works. So what I had to do is put in our highest projected enrollment of 952. That automatically tells me that a high school of that many students should be 146,193 square feet. Okay. We've got 139,000. That's after tearing down the fine arts, the library, and the high school. Okay, that's after we did that. So I have to go look at my suitability analysis. I have to say what structures were built before 2008. If it was built before 2008, they will not penalize you. So we have a gym, it's 41,000 square feet, and we have the performing arts done for. Both of those were built before 2008. So that leaves us a suitability of 47,680. Okay, that's what I said. Okay, that's what I did. State comes back and goes, we agree with this. However, we are not giving you an allowance to tear down the library and the fine arts. They're good buildings, they don't need to come down. They're not under the PMB structure. The reason we were tearing those down is because that was going to be the location of the new high school, right? So they say, we're not going to give you that square footage, okay? So they're going to add back in that suitability. So that's where it comes back down to like 30,000 square feet at that point, is where they say that's all you're going to get. Even though your building is 85,000 square feet, you've got all of this over here. So you have too much square footage, so we're only gonna approve you for this amount. And it is kinda shoddy, and I know Ms. Dewey even told, the assistant director and the director, doesn't seem fair that you tell us we need to tear down 80,000, but you're gonna only fund us at 30 or something like that, and I went, yeah, we understand. But this is what every district faces across the state every time. If, one of the things that we had talked about doing here at the district was a grade reconfiguration. Bringing ninth grade down, right? And then we were gonna move, sixth grade to the junior high, so there was a 6, 7, and 8, and then kind of moving grades around. It would then give kind of room to everybody in the elementaries, and then taking, one of the campuses, was it the kindergarten? And turning it into a pre-K center, okay? I said, well, if you do that, we have to show excess POR for every campus that touches. So then if you wanted to build a new high school or add on to a high school, if I look at every campus that grade change covers, and I show excess space at everywhere, you're not gonna get any funding. I'm facing it at Mansfield. Mansfield has 3 campuses, elementary, high school, middle school. They wanna close the middle school down, and they wanna move, some kids here and here. The elementary needs classroom space to accommodate the 5th and 6th grade, okay? They need that. The high school was poorly designed, has a lot of dead space. It's a big high school. They have too much square footage. They cancel my elementary need out. So, it sucks, it's politics. To a point, I understand it, because they have to have gauges on how much they can do. They're not saying to you, you can't do it on your own. They're just saying, we have to have gauges on how much we can fund, and what the parameters are of what we can fund. So as you can see, a good example is we were gonna put in 33 classrooms, just general ed classrooms, 850 square feet, general ed. We have 17 that are there, that are remaining. Keep in mind now, I'm looking, the POR is after I have demoed the high school, so it's got nothing to do with the high school, nothing to do with the fine arts building and library. It's the other buildings. There's 17 classrooms. The state says, according to the number of students, you should only need 29 general ed classrooms. So you can see, we really only need to add 12, not 33. That's where districts get penalized for offering really good courses. Farmington is facing the same thing at their high school. They need more space. They don't qualify for more space. They offer, I think, 10 or 12 CTE programs. The state says you should have 3. We will fund 3. So all of those other spaces count against them. And again, it's a minimum build, maximum fund. So it's just a funding mechanism that they use. I have Jasper at Kingston. This is the other side of the point. I'm applying for a partnership project for Kingston. I don't know if you've been to Kingston. They're a K-12 all-inclusive campus. All of their crap needs to come down. I mean, we got termites, we got holes in walls, we got critters coming into the building. But they only have 8 high school teachers and 8 elementary teachers. So we got 16 teachers K through 12. The POR says that for their enrollment, they should have 2 science classrooms, 2 art rooms, and 2 libraries. Well, I have 1 science teacher, 1 librarian, and 1 art teacher, right? So I am dickering with the state going, I don't need to build 69,000 square feet. I don't need to overbuild. You know, now, they're not real keen on letting you underbuild, but that's, so, you know, so you got districts that are trying to build less because they don't have all those teachers, but then you've got people like us or Farmington who offer great classes, and we have more classes than what we need, and then it hurts us, so,
More classes than required,
more classes than required.
not need.
Well, yeah, it's true.
I mean, that's
That's
what
true.
it boils down to.
What we need is 33, what's
Again,
required is 29.
Our standard is
Yeah,
up here.
Yeah, exactly.
You're funding down here.
Right, right.
Or AP classes with 10 students in it,
Yeah.
you need 24, and that, right?
We're being
You need 30.
penalized.
Right, so
For 30.
here's the.
For high school.
Here's the space note, so it show you for kindergarten, 20 students, maximum class size, 20 students, grades 1 through 3, 25, grades 4 through 5, 28, grade 6, 28, 7 through 8 is 30. And then, high school kind of becomes a lot of specialty rooms. High school classroom, maximum class is 30 as well. So that's where it also hurts districts, as far as funding. If they
On
run
the
smaller
specialty,
classes.
on the specialty rooms, is there a different formula for that?
There
Not only
is,
do we have the pathways where we offer more, some of our classes require a bigger space to,
right, so like, art room is required. A lot of districts will have an art room and a music room in an elementary, right? But they're only required if you have 550 students or more. So,
So they'd split a room.
PE is 10,
Suggest.
for high school is 15 square feet per student. That's a PE. They don't pay for gyms. They pay for PE buildings.
Just a large classroom.
Right.
With bleachers.
A
With
library,
bleachers
a
and a basketball
library
goal.
is 10% of the
Or two.
student capacity
Two.
multiplied by 40 square feet per student. That's your library. Your dining room is, so yeah, so there are calculations. Workforce development, again, 3.
well, I was like in Agri today, in industrial arts or whatever we call it. Those take significant spaces for a welding, legitimate welding shop and machine shop and a woodworking and all of that. I was at the job fair with AOPA. That's taken off of that. How much space is that gonna take? Do they have formulas for those?
There are, so the Department of Workforce Education gave the facilities division their space requirement. So you can see up on the screen, a greenhouse, the required size is 1,100 square feet. We have one of 2,700 square feet. Banking and business instructional, which could be keyboarding, business and accounting. The standard size, required size is 850. We have 2 at 2,200, so they're 1,100 square feet.
That answers it, you're on top of that, that answers the question.
Yeah.
You're finding everything you can find.
Yeah, exactly. I think our construction technology lab, which is our big one, it's almost 5,500 square feet, and the required size is 2,500. So, it does hurt us, as far as funding goes. It's just one of those damn things, because everybody faces it. But again, this is just a funding, it's just for their funding purposes, you know, it allows them to fund. That way, nobody in the state of Arkansas can say, well, you paid for them to have a 5,500 square foot construction trades lab, and I only got a 2,500. So everybody's to the same standard. So what we do, going forward, obviously, is kind of dependent on what we get back from the fire marshal and stuff like that. But you know, Chris was pretty diligent. You know, he sat down with the principal, he sat down with the teachers, and we put in there a tit for tat. you know, we got 33 classrooms, we need 33 classrooms. Now, it may be that we look at utilization of those classrooms. So it may be that a classroom's only used 2 periods of the day. Well, is there another class that could share that class, the other, 5 periods of a day? So it may get down to how we utilize the spaces in the building. We may not need, I've got one district that I've slapped a hand on, he's like, well, I need, and I'm like, well, you've got 3 paras set up for an office space in an empty classroom. They don't need an 850 space office, square foot office. So again, it goes back to the utilization of how we can pull the project down so that it's more cost effective for the district overall. Obviously, we won't be, and again, very hypothetical. Look at the newspaper here. We wouldn't be building on the same location, right? So we wouldn't have to tear down the fine arts, we wouldn't have to tear down the library. So those are spaces that would come out of that design that we wouldn't have to get rid of. And then it's just looking at the utilization of the other programs. Do we have to have 33 classrooms, or can we get by with 25 and utilize them more effectively? Any questions about that?
Does it matter how many classrooms? I mean, they're only gonna offer funding for X number,
That's
so
right,
whether we say
that's
we
right.
want 50 classrooms.
No, it doesn't matter. No, it
right?
absolutely does not matter.
It's all square foot.
It's just, what can we
You're
do?
gonna say, this is the amount that you're.
Right, if we decide, or whomever decides it for us, that we have to build, right? We don't wanna go back to the community with the same project. We don't wanna go back with that same project and that same dollar amount. We wanna show that we have made, thoughtful considerations, that we have pulled out spaces that we don't need. Of course, a big chunk of that will be, those library and fine arts spaces, because that fine arts building is almost 18,000 square feet. So that's 18,000 square feet we don't have to rebuild, so that's brought it down a little bit more as well. So yeah, so if we have to cross that bridge, when we do, then we want to be able to show that we've given thoughtful consideration and how we've changed the scope, brought the scope down to what we just need. Maybe we don't need 3-story building, maybe we don't need big atriums and robotics play areas and things like that. So there is that. Now I think one of the board members had a question about architects and construction managers. Anybody?
Sounds good. Let's go with that.
Let's go with that. Arkansas Code Law 1911-801, 4.02, you are not allowed under law to bid architects or construction managers. You hire based off of qualifications, okay? So what you do is you advertise a request for qualifications for a construction manager or an architect. You review those qualifications, you vet them out. Let's say you get 10 firms that submit. You vet them down to 3 or 4, you bring them in, you interview them, you make the selection that you want. I have interview questions, I have a rubric, everything like that I offer up to districts. Once you make that selection of who you want based off of their qualifications, then you begin fee negotiation. If you cannot come to an agreed upon fee, you say, I'm sorry, we can't reach an agreement. You go to the next person on the qualifications rubric, okay? And you just do that until you get it. Now, what you do have the legal authority to bid is a general contractor, okay? But you can't bid for a general contractor until you have a design plan. Because what that is if we say, we want Baldwin Shell to bid the project as a general contractor, they bid the whole totality of the project, and they present to you a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, okay? What a construction manager does is they bid out each individual trade, okay? So then you have a spectrum of trades. I like that because I can catch contractors that I've had dirty dealings with, and I can tell the district, no, you don't want them. You know, even though they may be low bid, no, you don't want them. But when you get a general contractor like Baldwin Shell or whoever, they take the plans and then they submit you with a GMP. You don't know, subcontractors and things like that. So that's how those processes work.
Do we get any feedback on why we didn't get funded this spring? Like, do we know how close were we, or are we, we're a long way away from this, are we wasting our time looking at it? Like, do they provide any feedback on that?
Well, so the first mistake with the first millage was we went for the millage without knowing if we were gonna be funded. We went, I think it was that fall, and we went with the general election. Bad idea all the way around. The second millage was the first part of May, and we had fallen just below that line. And I think it was only like $1.4, $1.5 million is what we were gonna get. So had it passed, we could have theoretically been bumped up because Highland turned back $6 million. So it was just that we fell just below that funding line.
So we were close.
Yeah, oh yeah, we were close.
And were some schools, maybe I misunderstood, but there were some schools that have been funded because they've started projects and they can't finish them. Is that, am I dreaming that? Or are they given a little extra?
So they're getting extra. So there was,
That's what I thought.
there were 3 districts, this last funding cycle that challenged the commission. What had happened was their plans were drawn, they had a pre-bid estimate, okay? But the plans had not been final approval, so they get like a final sign-off, and then the safe room kicked in. But they had gone for a millage, similar to what happened, similar to what we would have faced, okay? So when the safe room rule kicked in, they had already gone for a millage. They knew, and they were getting, but then the safe room kicked in. So there were 3 districts, 3 different projects that got additional funding because of the safe room issue. If you build an addition or a new school and it has an occupancy of over 50 students, you must build a safe room that will house the totality of the student body.
So even if you just did like a addition?
Yeah,
Not the teachers.
yeah, well,
Totality.
Gonna leave
You're
them
on your
out.
own.
You would have
You're on your own,
Student
Barbara.
body said.
classrooms.
and it was not uncommon
You would have
for
to
a
have a
lot of
safe
districts to do what they called safe areas. They would do hard hallways, things like that.
It's huge.
But now they have to be built to FEMA 361 standards. And I can tell you, I just finished 2 safe rooms, one at Marshall and one at Jasper. Jasper was 564 square foot,
Who's being paid?
and Marshall was 516 square foot. So that did kick a lot of districts out of turning money back when that component was added on. So a lot of districts that got approved and funded had to rescind the project and turn the money back because they couldn't afford to go forward because of that safe room component.
What's the minimum square footage per student in that calculation?
3 square feet, it's the same as any FEMA shelter, it's 5 square feet per person. And then you take 10% of the population and you do 10 square feet per person for wheelchair access.
So every school has to build one of these?
Well,
when they go into doing construction.
construction.
Oh.
So
it's a
what does that
grant.
math equal for us? Like,
So if we had 900 students,
Right.
let's just say, if we had 100 teachers,
30,000.
6,000 square foot safe room. Now, what Josh had done, we're looking at the preliminary design, is he had incorporated the safe room into the build of the building. So all of the hallways, certain classrooms, certain areas were all built, were all designed FEMA 361. So you didn't have like a separate standalone safe room, it was part of the internal structure.
Which makes sense. It just
That's more.
adds to
Which
the
also
cost of the square
probably
footage to
made-
build it to that standard.
Right,
I-
right.
Isn't
And
Hacker,
if you
doesn't
build,
he
I
have,
mean, if you build a separate
I was told it
standalone
did.
shelter,
no, not safe room.
districts almost feel
but they're
compelled
way
to
set.
open them up for public use at night, but if it's in the component of the school, you don't
Yeah.
necessarily feel that compelled. You have to if it's funded with FEMA, but, you know, not necessarily.
So that probably did make our bid go up,
Oh, it would have, oh, yeah, most assuredly.
if he built that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something the public does not know. That would be good to know.
Safe room piece was a big deal.
Safe
It
room,
was a big deal all across the
Piece.
state, I heard.
It still is a big deal.
I heard
mean,
quite
they're
a
still
bit.
fighting. There are some portable, I don't know how you call them, prefab,
Prefab concrete ones.
prefab
Yeah, I've
safe
installed
room
some of those fire alarm systems in those. Flippin
Yeah.
has one.
that you can like, that you can stick outside. And, I mean,
It's all
they're,
building.
they're hurricane rated, they're FEMA rated, but the state fire marshal is kind of bucking it, because it's like, well, it does, and the ABA are kind of bucking it because they don't meet the fresh air requirements, and I'm like, hell, you're only supposed to be in there no more than 2 hours, you know, it's a safe room for a tornado, not for, you know.
Yeah, what do
Long-term
you
shelter.
want it to protect you from is what,
Oh.
Yeah, so there's still a lot of fighting going on
Yeah.
with that. The most recent legislative body, there was a pact put out that said that safe rooms and pre-K to be classified as academic space. Had that happened, a whole world of money would have opened up for us. And the reason I say that is because if we took our kindergarten building right now and we wanted to turn that into a pre-K building,
We do not.
the state would say, you've got 40,000 square foot of usable space. Because pre-K is not recognized as academic space. And safe rooms are not recognized. So had that legislative act passed, then funding would have been available for pre-K, for safe rooms and things like that.
I wonder what their numbers are to come up with something like that. Like, have we had deaths and tornadoes and blown away kids?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they gotta come up with some sort of backing.
So,
when,
that's the same reason that our property, our statement, our insurance went up so high this year. Arkansas is officially categorized as tornadic alley.
Well,
A little bit of inside information that I heard about that, don't quote me on this. Throw stuff at him now. Wynn School District, when they got hit with a
Mhm.
tornado, they were going to be covered 100%, you know, and they were going to actually pick up not only insurance coverage, but there's also a little bit of funding with a division called catastrophic. So if the cost of construction is higher than the cost of replacement, they'll help offset it, okay? A school board member thought that they were being cheated and hired Lords of London. And Lords of London put out this big hooty hoot, and I think it was a $32 million claim that the state was going to pay to build a new school, turned into like a $60 million claim. But then following all the tornadoes that have been in Arkansas, The National Weather Service actually listed us as a tornadic alley. And now we're also higher up on the seismic activity. That was one of the things that was brought into the structural report, is now we're seeing more seismic activity in the state. And the PMB is not designed to seismic load. So now if you build a building that's, you know, 2-story, you have to have considerations for seismic capacity, seismic load, seismic design. And now with any addition or new school, you have to put in the tornado component, so. We've had a lot of schools that have gotten damaged in the past 10 years. Dumas, Marmaduke, Wynn, Mena, Bologna. So. Any other questions? So hopefully you have a little bit clearer understanding of what all we have to do. And a lot of it, I kind of tried to touch on with the community meetings so that they had a little bit of an understanding as well. It's not perfect by any design, but it is a lot better than what we had. I mean, to date, the state has put in, I think it was around $3.2 billion to schools. And that's, you know, over a 20-year period. And that's a lot. We've been able to get out of some really bad buildings. We've been able to get a lot of systems fixed and replaced. But it's not ever gonna be perfect, you know, we know that, but it is far better than what we had in the past. In the past, it was strictly on the districts. You wanted a new school, you had to go into the debt, you know, debt for it. Now at least there is some help.
They help with the FEMA, with the safe room.
It's its own beast.
Right. Right now, FEMA isn't funding any safe rooms. They're doing maybe 1 or 2 a year. No, not until the legislators decide that it's academic space.
Make you do it, but you figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
We should be used to unfunded mandates by now.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of those
Yeah.
out there.
Public
Yeah.
education.
But FEMA, you could, with that brick grant, let's say you wanted to do a community safe room.
Yeah, so
I
if
mean,
you
it would,
wanted to
it's a
kill,
long shot, I know.
it is. If you wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and you got a FEMA grant to build a safe room at the high school or Peakston or Wilkes or whatever, a lot of districts will do those as a PE space, an auxiliary gym. If you're not doing any like athletic tournaments in there, you can do a lower ceiling, you can do a 14-foot instead of a 16-foot, and you can get FEMA assistance with those. They'll pay up to 75% on those cost sharing, as long as Baxter County has a current and approved hazard mitigation plan in place. And if the funding's available for it, then you just have to go through the arduous application process and hope that you get it. Then if you go into building something, you can say, oh, we've got a safe room, and it's within so many feet of the school, and then you're fine. Then you don't have to add it to the construction.
I think there was one in Arkansas last year, is that right, Danville? So that's the only one I saw.
Yeah, yeah. Jasper and Marshall, even though they got finished just recently on theirs, their funding was from 2021.
Okay. I've only looked at last year.
Yeah, I think Danville just is the only one in the state that got one last year.
So it's a long shot, but
Yeah.
if,
Give me an office.
Then the first thing is to check with, and I can do that with FEMA to see if Baxter County has an approved hazard mitigation plan. If they don't, that's when you get on your county judge at
I
OEM.
think we do.
We do.
Why don't you get on that, Lisa?
I'll get on that.
You know that. Any other questions, concerns? This is your time to ask that which you wouldn't in public.
We're being recorded anyway, so it don't matter.
The agenda said first read, like, because it says first read, how many reads, like, what, how many, is there one, or is there?
I've
is
never
there-
heard of a first read.
We're gonna, yeah.
So I have to have the school board resolution in my hands, no later than the 20th of January. So, I'm hoping next week to have from the fire marshal. And, it may be that we just do a work session or something, to plot out what the next steps are. Or it may be that everything's kosher and we just say we don't, unless there's anything you wanna add to the master
You need another app up there.
plan. You reckon?
Man,
So generally, the, master plan, the board does in November, is what my understanding is. If you wanna push back a month, that's fine. It is board action. So if we don't have our, I mean, that's just 2 weeks. So
Yeah, I
definitely
would
can
probably
wait till
say, let's
December.
push it to December. That way it gives us time to,
Look back
get a
through.
response and determine what we need to do.
maybe draft something in
But
November.
even if we have to replace the building or the structure, we're not applying for partnership this year. I'm not going, this was a bad enough hornet's nest, I'm not jumping into the viper nest. The last thing we wanna do is say, oh, we're going for more money and, yeah, you know, so we're gonna wait, we're gonna reevaluate, we're gonna figure out what is, you know, what we can do to make the project as reasonable and viable for everyone involved.
So with that being said, as long as our safety measures that are already in the master plan are approved, we could approve this plan in, December.
You
But-
could.
But that would be pending the information we get from.
Right.
I just wanna make sure I'm on the right path.
And, you know, in all honesty, I've got a good enough relationship with the state. Well, I mean, yeah, we can. And if something changes, you know, and we need to go back and add something or change something, we can still do that before the end of January.
Okay.
Ms. Jones, is that on any other questions?
Did everybody sign the,
Yes, ma'am.
school board training? Okay, because I want to make sure you guys get your credit hours for that.
Okay.
Thank you for being here, and
Yeah,
fighting
yeah,
through
it's
the
worthwhile,
sickness,
that's for sure.
et cetera, so.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know, I corrected it real quick, you know, I guess I did work for the state. No, I do not work for the state, I work for you. And so, my whole job is to protect you. To keep you guys out of trouble to the best of my ability. Sometimes it's really hard, but that's my job, is just to keep you guys out of trouble and moving forward. I can't answer why the local fire marshal has never seen that upstairs. Have you all been up there?
He's new. He's new, he's only been like,
And the,
and we,
well, better not say.
we
And the other
can't,
one passed
we
away.
can't
The
speak
other one
for,
passed away?
yeah, we can't speak for
Yeah,
what has happened, we can
Right.
only speak for
Fire
what we're
chief.
trying
that's
to
Fire
exactly
change.
right. We can only,
Chris?
you know, we can't say why they did or did not, but,
Chief.
It's the fire marshal never worked.
you know, it's like I was explaining, when you say that we want to do this, then we'll just expose ourselves to all the ugly. And even if we came back and went, okay, well, we wanna renovate the building, then, well, you touch it by 10%, now you gotta bring it all up to code, so, for the board's sanity and Ms. Dewey's sanity, the best outcome is that the state fire marshal goes, yeah, this will make the building secure and, you know, safe, and we don't have to worry about it, and then we just trot on down the road, you know. But, you know, it's like Ms. Klinger, you know, she, in her online publications, she's only pointed out that the fire marshal saw no safety concerns for students or staff, and I reiterated to the state fire marshal, how is it a fireman's hazard, firefighter's hazard, and a catastrophic event not somehow
Student safety
reflective of
related.
student staff safety? So, the narrative that is out there, it's very much like a YouTube parody. There's bits and pieces that are put in there, but it's not ever the whole thing. I saw one of her publications where she had listed the transition letter, and then she listed Sean Lofton's recommendations, but she didn't put in the state fire marshal's letter or his letter, you know. So it's, you know, and the againers you're always gonna have, most of the time you can't ever change their mind. But all we can do is tell the truth and, you know, try to move forward as best as possible with the truth. I will tell you when I'm wrong. I will not ever lie to you. And I have been wrong before, and I've confessed up to it. I worked for a whole year for a district because I made a mistake for free. I worked for them for free because I made a mistake. So, any questions? Feel a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure we do.
We're just gonna
Thank
keep doing
you.
what we
Thank you,
do.
guys.
So we are adjourned. I guess we.
Move to adjourn.